The Myth of the Global Government. Part 1. Imagine this. You're sipping your morning tea, scrolling through the news, and suddenly, there it is again. Whispers of a shadowy elite pulling the strings of the world. Wars, pandemics, economic collapse, everything, they say, is part of a grand design, a puppet show for billions, staged by a handful of hidden hands. It sounds absurd, and yet millions believe it. In Russia, since 2014, belief in the so-called global government has surged from 45% to 67%. 3 out of 4 believers think this power is hostile to their country. But don't be so quick to assume this mindset exists only in Russia. In Germany, nearly a third believe in a global ruling force. In the United States, nearly a quarter. All convinced that an invisible hand controls everything, from influence to finance, from information to ideology. A cabal of billionaires and bloodlines, of Illuminati, Freemasons, globalists. Perhaps all at once. And behind it all, something even more intoxicating: mystery. This, friends, is the boss level of conspiracy theories, the crown jewel of paranoia, the global government. But in this story, we won't laugh at believers, we won't mock or ridicule. Instead, we'll take you inside the myth. We'll dissect it like a philosopher with a scalpel, peeling away its layers one by one. Not just to tell the story, but to understand why this story is so seductive. So buckle in, let's go back to where it all began. Chapter 1. The Desire for One King. Long before the word globalization appeared in textbooks, people already dreamed of a world ruled by one. But the dream wasn't always a nightmare. At first, it was a fantasy of peace. If there had to be rulers, why not just one ruler? One mind to decide for all. A benevolent monarch who owns everything, and thus has nothing more to desire. With no rivals to conquer, perhaps, they'd rule with justice. Immanuel Kant imagined it, a rational world republic. Dante envisioned a single empire to bring order to chaos, one higher than the Pope. Even Marx, though from a different angle, dreamed of a stateless global society. It's easy to forget, but back then, people didn't even understand how big the world really was. To the Chinese Empire, they were the center. To the Romans, they were the light in a sea of barbarism. To the Incas, their mountain domains were the universe. So the first global governments weren't global at all. They were empires: Persians, Romans, Chinese, and then the Mongols. Perhaps the closest thing the medieval world ever had to a single ruling force. By the 13th century, their territory stretched from Romania to the edge of Korea. Later, the British Empire came close, owning a quarter of the world's land. But empires fall, always. And in their ashes, ideas rise. Chapter 2. The Phantom of Unity. After centuries of bloodshed came a strange new dream. What if, instead of conquering the world by sword, we could unite it by paper? In 1648, Europe signed the Peace of Westphalia, ending a brutal war that killed millions. That treaty became the birth certificate of modern international law, and from it, the seeds of global cooperation began to grow. Enlightenment thinkers picked up the thread. Why not one world republic? Why not a system that ends all war? It was noble, logical, and, in hindsight, deeply naive. As the 18th and 19th centuries unfolded, something else began to rise. Secret clubs. Not sinister at first, just gatherings of bored, well-read aristocrats. Picture this. You're a middle-aged architect in Yorkshire. It's 1453. You've inherited a cozy estate. Your kids are healthy. Your wife is charming. But you're bored, deeply bored. And then, one rainy evening, an old friend tells you about a strange club in London. A place where men with titles discuss abstract ideas, away from the noise of politics and the dogma of religion. They call themselves the Freemasons. And so, curiosity leads you through the door. Chapter 3. The Masons, Gentlemen, not gods. At first glance, the Freemasons are nothing remarkable. An elite book club, if we're honest. They donate to schools and hospitals, they avoid politics and religion, and above all, they believe in charity and order. To join, you must be a believer, not necessarily in a church, but in something higher. And once inside, you're discouraged from pursuing power. If you want to run the world, you're in the wrong place. The lodges spread: France, Italy, Russia. In St. Petersburg, Count Vorontsov even opened one. But rumors began to swirl. People who weren't invited started wondering, what are they hiding? Their closed doors became symbols of secrecy. Their symbols, an eye, a compass, a pyramid, began to whisper of deeper meaning. And so, the myth took root. That maybe they weren't just a club, maybe they were something more. The Myth of the Global Government, Part 2. The Devil Wears an Apron, Chapter 4, When Faith Meets Fear. What happens when a secret club of rational thinkers starts to threaten the church? In 1738, the Vatican had had enough. Pope Clement XII declared all Freemasons heretics, no hearings, no debate, just excommunication. Why? Not because of blood rituals or devil worship, but because they were competition. The church saw the Masons as rivals, educated, organized, and whispering dangerous ideas behind closed doors. Ideas about human rights, free will, reason, ideas that had no room for divine monarchs or papal thrones. And once fear takes hold, it spreads. Soon, monarchs followed: France, Austria, Russia. Governments began to suspect that these polite men in aprons were scheming revolutions over wine and candles. And then came the wildfire. 1789. The French Revolution. Heads rolled, thrones shattered, and in the aftermath, a French writer named Augustin Barruel stood up and said, "This was not the people. This was a plot, planned by secret societies, by Freemasons, and something far worse. That something worse had a name." Chapter 5. The Illuminati, Rationality with a Razor. Bavaria, 1776. A young professor named Adam Weishaupt, orphaned, brilliant, and raised by Jesuits, looked at the world and saw only chains of superstition, religion, monarchy, tradition. He dreamed of breaking them, but when he tried to join the Freemasons, they turned him away. Too young, too poor, too radical. So, he did what every stubborn genius eventually does. He started his own secret society. At first, it was called the Covenant of Perfectibility. Catchy. Not quite. They later changed it to something bolder. The Illuminati. Their mission: to liberate humankind from ignorance, to build a society based on reason, equality, and the dismantling of church and crown. No gods, no kings, only thought. But here's the twist. They were just 5 guys in a dorm room. Later, they grew. Adam joined a Masonic lodge, not to belong, but to recruit. Soon, the Illuminati counted hundreds of members, including scholars, nobles, and rogue idealists. But they weren't a global cabal. They were a study group with delusions of grandeur. And still, that was enough to terrify the powerful. The Bavarian crown outlawed them. Their papers were seized, their leaders exiled, and Adam Weishaupt vanished. The Illuminati were crushed in less than a decade. They should have become a historical footnote, another failed utopian experiment. But fate had other plans. Chapter 6. The Devil's Prank. Enter Léo Taxil, a 19th century French journalist, atheist, satirist, and world-class troll. Taxil hated the Catholic Church with a passion only rivaled by his talent for mockery. He wrote scandalous fake Bibles, vulgar Gospels, and obscene biographies of popes. But in 1885, he did something devious. He pretended to repent. He returned to Catholicism and was welcomed like a lost sheep. Then, from within, he began his ultimate prank. He started writing exposés on the Freemasons, wild, bloody, horrifying exposés. He claimed Masons worshiped the devil, that they held orgies, that they sacrificed babies, that they planned a global takeover in the name of Satan himself. The church ate it up. His books became bestsellers, and for 12 years the world believed. Until one day, at a packed conference, Taxil revealed the truth. He laughed in their faces. It had all been a joke. He made it up, every word of it, to humiliate the church. But the myth had already taken root. Even today, some conspiracy theorists still quote Taxil's satire as proof. Because once fear finds a face, it rarely lets go. Chapter 7. The Storm of the 20th Century. By the 1900s, the myth of the Illuminati had evolved. No longer just radical thinkers, now they were demons, puppet masters, architects of revolution. In Nazi Germany, Freemasons were hunted like Jews in Roma. Books by Augustin Baruel and Leo Taxil were cited as justification. Secret handshakes became evidence of treason. And then came the most dangerous forgery of all, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. A Russian fabrication dripping with anti-Semitism, claiming to reveal a Jewish conspiracy to dominate the world. It was a lie, plagiarized, clumsily written, and repeatedly debunked. But it didn't matter. Henry Ford published 500,000 copies in the U.S. Adolf Hitler quoted it in speeches. The idea of a secret world government, evil, foreign, manipulative, was no longer fringe. It had become mainstream, weaponized, and soaked in blood. The Myth of the Global Government, Part 3. Control, Chaos, and the Comfort of Conspiracy. Chapter 8. Clubs Behind Curtains. After World War II, the world changed. The lines between nations blurred, borders opened, economies linked. Globalization wasn't a theory, it was a fact. New institutions emerged: the United Nations, the European Union, the IMF, the World Bank, and behind them, or so some said, the real rulers. Whispers turned toward new gatherings, elite, quiet, and almost invisible to the public eye, like the Bilderberg Club. Formed in 1954, it was an annual meeting of the powerful, politicians, bankers, media moguls. No press, no transcripts, just conversations in luxury hotels. And that made people nervous. What do you get when billionaires talk in private? Some say diplomacy, others say a blueprint for control. Right-wing critics claim Bilderberg wants to build a socialist world order. Left-wing critics accuse it of engineering capitalism's domination. Americans fear a European takeover. Russians imagine it as the birthplace of global anti-Russian plots. The truth: it's likely just a posh dinner party, a networking retreat for elites. Because where else can billionaires gossip? Not Tinder. But the myth lives on. Chapter 9. From Code to Cult, the QAnon Era. Then came the internet, and with it, the final metamorphosis of the myth. On obscure forums like 4chan, users began to spin a new story. A secret cabal of elites, politicians, celebrities, CEOs, weren't just rich. They were monsters, drinking children's blood, harvesting a mythical drug called adrenochrome, running global trafficking rings, and pulling the strings of the media. The only hero, Donald J. Trump. In this fantasy, Trump was sent to dismantle the pedophile cabal from the inside. The storm was coming. Justice was near. This movement, known as QAnon, began as a joke, a strange, ironic digital cult. But as the joke spread, some stopped laughing. And on January 6, 2021, the punchline stormed the U.S. Capitol. In QAnon, we find the modern form of the old myth, a secret enemy controlling everything, a chosen savior rising against them, and a community of truth seekers ready to fight back with hashtags and rage. the Illuminati had returned. Only this time, they wore the faces of pop stars and presidential candidates. Chapter 10. Why we need the monster. So here we are. After centuries of war, empire, religion, and revolution, the myth of the global government is still alive. Why? Because chaos terrifies us. The modern world is messy, unfair, overwhelming. When your rent goes up, when your job disappears, when your country falters, who do you blame? Yourself? The economy? Number that's too painful. It's easier to believe that someone, somewhere, planned this. That the world is not random. That behind every tragedy, every injustice, there is an architect. Conspiracy is order. Conspiracy is comfort. If there's a secret cabal running the world, at least someone is in charge. Even if they're evil, they're predictable. And that somehow feels safer than chaos. Chapter 11. The Cake of Paranoia. So what is today's global government myth really? It's a layered cake of historical leftovers. First layer, imperial ambition, the dream of one world under one rule. Second layer, the mystique of secret societies, Masons, Illuminati, aristocrats with too much time. Third layer, paranoia and propaganda, forged documents, anti-Semitic lies, and reactionary fear. Fourth layer, modern anxiety, globalization, billionaires, and digital surveillance. Fifth layer, internet distortion, memes, satire, and radicalized message boards. Sprinkle in some pseudoscience, celebrity gossip, and moral panic, and you've baked the most seductive narrative of the 21st century. But don't be fooled. The real danger is not in the belief that someone rules the world. The danger is in not questioning why we need to believe it in the first place. Epilogue. One final question. So now, imagine you were actually part of this global government. Imagine you sat behind the curtain. What would you do? Would you issue a new law to save the world? Would you fight injustice? Or would you just listen quietly as billions whispered your name in the dark? If this story made you think, good. That means it worked. We don't ask you to believe everything. We ask you to question everything. And if you'd like to keep exploring with us through myths, ideas, and forgotten truths, subscribe. Share this with someone who still believes in certainty. And leave a thought below, not for the algorithm, but for the curious minds who come after you. See you in the next story. And until then, stay thoughtful.